Hello everyone, this is Ashish, and today we are going to continue our session on Windows PowerShell Basics training, and we will continue our session on .NET objects in PowerShell. And before we start, let's quickly go through what we have so far covered. So we have covered introduction of PowerShell, PowerShell Basics, PowerShell remoting, scripting and debugging, and PowerShell development. We are here, and right now we are in the last part of this, that where how you work with the .NET object in PowerShell. And let's continue that. Okay, so as you know that PowerShell is built on top of .NET framework, and .NET framework is a tool that is being used by Microsoft to develop their most of the tool, and even other people in the industry. So PowerShell is built on top of .NET framework. That means that everything you have in .NET you have in PowerShell. So and that's why PowerShell is so powerful, because it is backed by a very strong programming language framework. And you get a lot of functions, methods, libraries which are written in .NET, and you can make use of them while you are still scripting, or I can say you are still not really doing programming all the way. So that's why the .NET object in PowerShell is so important, and it becomes much more important when you surpass a certain level of proficiency in writing script. So script, and then when you start moving into the tools area, where you start creating tools using PowerShell scripting, that's where you will start coming across these concept of object classes and all. And that's why it is very important. So if you are just a beginner, maybe this is not really important for you for the time being. You can still work with the script available, or so far what we have covered, you can go through it, and then you can write your script. But the moment you start debugging your modules, the moment you start getting inspired by some modules which are shared on GitHub by Microsoft or some other people, great people in the industry, and you want to utilize them, then you might have to debug a little bit and go through the classes in .NET, how those things are being used for the PowerShell. And that's where this particular thing comes into the picture. Nonetheless, even if you are working on the basic level, because underlying execution is happening on .NET framework, it is always good to know how the system is actually working, what is actually making. So the pillars are really the .NET framework, and on top of it the PowerShell is running. So if you know the pillars, then the debugging really gets is simpler for you. So that's why we are covering this thing, even though we are kind of creating a playlist for basics. But this thing is still important. Even if you are a basic learner, you should know how PowerShell runs behind the scene, and what does it mean when you create a variable, when you start working with the types. So let's see how it actually works. So I have couple of examples. In the PowerPoint as well, which will be available for you to download from SlideShare. So let's see. I am creating a variable with name date. Okay, I can create the variable with a simple type variable can be created just like this, but I want to create a variable with a specific type, and I know it is a object. So I will say new object, and I will say type name. No need to mention the type name, it will automatically take that. System dot date time, and I will say it is like 2018 and 10 and 07. So I'm giving a date to this, and let's see how it. Okay, so it automatically detects that this is a date, and this is how the date is, and this is how it picks up that. Now another example I have listed on here is for the string. So let's call it my string. Okay, right, my string is equals to new object again, and this time the object type will be system dot string. Actually, these things, system dot string is a class that is defined in the .NET framework, and that particular class I am calling to make an object of that particular class. So if you are not familiar with the object oriented programming, or if you are not familiar with the basics of object, what is an object and what is a class, I have already I have already explained that in one of the previous video in the playlist, so I will recommend you watch it. So in nutshell, class is a template, and we are creating a copy of that template that we call a object, and that object is actually a my string, that is a variable name, and that is a object. So I will say new object type of this, and I will say the value of it will be like this, hey string, something like that, right? So I have created a variable which has a value which is my string, so I will say my string, and it will print the value, right? But if I will see get type, then I will get the type of this object, and this is a object, the base is object, and this is a string. So this is how, so object is anything in .NET is an object, and then the object has a template that we call a class. So a string is a class, and we are creating a copy of that class that we call object. We are kind of creating an instance of that particular class. So you can quickly go through the previous video to understand the object oriented concept. So in nutshell, this is what we are doing. So the basic idea over here is that everything you create is an object, and these are the very basic objects you have, but you have some really complex objects in .NET framework. I mean there are a lot. I mean, if you go through the .NET framework library, then you can see, I mean, you have different types of classes, and then you can create your own classes, and then there are different ways of working with those classes. You can, and then again different classes for different type of domain, like you have classes for working with databases, classes for working with the graphical user interface, and so on and so forth. So that's where the idea is, that everything you have in .NET, you can make use of them, you can create an object for that, and then you can work with that. So that's the idea. And again, when you start working with the object, you can actually extend the object to a level that where you can actually manipulate that object, and add certain things in the file, or here we have example of XML file. So let's call that XML file. I will say dollar my first XML, and I will say GC, which is get content, C data, oops, testing, and here is the XML file. Okay, so if I will call it, and if I want to see what is there, my first XML, and I get a, so if you get a file like this, get content, if you directly get the get content, then you get the it will read the file, you get the file content, but it will read it like a plain text. It is an object, but it is a file. It is, I mean, it has I mean, it is still not able to detect it is a XML type of file, which is a type in .NET. So how you get it, you can actually cast it like a XML file. So if I will cast the variable like XML, this is a XML variable I am calling, and I will give the name like my second XML. Actually I will call the same thing, and just GC get content, and C data, again testing, and again same employee file, but just that I am casting the variable after getting the content as a XML file. So if I will cast it, and if I will my second XML, then there is a difference. So here I have a XML object actually, and now I can play around with this XML object and do certain things. So for example, I will do one thing: add member. I will say add a member, add member. Then it will be input type is my second XML, so my second XML input type. Then I will say member type is alias member set node property, and then I will say name is, I will say description, and I will say value, and then I will say this is employee DB in XML. That's it. Now let's try to access the same thing, my second XML, and you will have the description now. Earlier there was no description, right? So that's how you work with the objects. So earlier it was not acting as an object, so we could get the content, but we could not do XML specific thing. But now we have the object as a XML, and if I will show you a XML, my second XML dot, I will get actually XML specific things. You see, all these things are XML specific, right? Node type, implementation, has child. And now let's do one thing. Let's go to my first, because we have read it like a normal file, so we don't really have XML specific functions or properties. So that's where the difference is, that depending upon the way you get the content, I mean you get the object and type of object, you get the inbuilt methods automatically, and then you can make use of those methods to work with that object. And that's where the real power of PowerShell comes into the picture. And when you say that you are actually using the .NET programming language, however you are still in a scripting interface, right? So that's being said. Now again, you can actually do things like adding functions to classes, types as well. And this is again just like that example, like instead of input object is the same thing, and then I am, instead of adding the node property, here we are adding a script method to a array. So things like that. And again, now you can actually create your class in PowerShell, and then you can make use of that class as well. So we normally create classes in programming languages, but here we have the option to create our own class as well. So suppose I will say that dollar my, I will say my class, something like this, and then I will say this add, and end it with add symbol just to make sure, right? And I will say my class name is public class ps class, right? And I will say the class, oops, okay, and this class will have a simple method, suppose public, oops, public string, and I will say hello, simple method, let's make it say hello, and I'll say return yes, hey from PowerShell class, something like this, PS class, let's make it, okay. And I will say this, and simply we, let's clear this, and simply we say that let's run it, okay. We have this instance now. I will say add type, and I will say type type definition, and the value is this my class. Now what I'm doing is I have created a class definition. I'm adding it in my PowerShell console session. So once I have added, okay, I have this class and associated method in my PowerShell. So let's see. So if I will say that my oops, I will create another object. Earlier I was creating object using the inbuilt classes. Now I will create an object using my class which I have just created in PowerShell. So I will say my class is, make it like instance. Let's do a little bit longer just to make sure. Object, yeah, object, and the type will be ps, and let's tab. Oops, let's do one thing. ps, okay, and let's be ps class. I have it right. So if I will do this ps class, and if I will say this, and now let's do one thing. I have an instance that is my class instance, right? My class instance, okay. And if I will, you see there are few methods. These are the basic inbuilt object methods, and then I have a say hello, and if I will say hello, and if I will enter, I got the output which I have defined in this class. So in nutshell, you can use the classes which has been defined in the PowerShell, fine. No, sorry, in the .NET framework, fine. You can also create your own class in the PowerShell if you need it, and you don't really have to go into the any .NET programming language interface. Of course this thing is little bit of C#, right, which is .NET programming language, one of the .NET programming language, .NET framework programming language. You have different programming language as well, VB.NET and other. But the thing is, you are still getting the options to use these things in the PowerShell itself, and which is really powerful. So you start getting start getting the importance of these things as soon as you start creating the tools, start debugging the PowerShell modules that has been created by those people who has written actually these things in a very full-fledged utilizing the full-fledged .NET programming background or framework behind the scene. So that's being said, let's go to the next slide and let's see what's next. Okay, so this is one of the other example. We will try to create a little bit of more working GUI interface, but what it says that you can also create the form in PowerShell, which is a Windows form. So what it is like, you can create a form object, yeah. Form is equals to new object, yeah, new object, and I will say system dot windows dot forms dot form. Okay, oops, form. I created a type of this object, fine. Now I will say dollar form, oops, form dot show show dialog. Let's do one thing, show dialog. So it will show up. You see, you have a form, right? You can add buttons here as well. I have I think, okay, let's I have a script here little bit. I have it handy to save our time. So in nutshell, let's do. So here I'm just like that, I'm creating a form object, I'm calling the text property of this, and then I'm creating a button, then I'm following up, setting up the property of that button. Then I'm telling if button is clicked, then close that form, then adding that button on the form, and then I'm activating it, and then I'm showing it on in front. So let's just see how it shows, right? And if I will click on it, this form will fire the this button will fire up the event that I have defined, and it is to close that form. So it just closes it. So it is just like, it is just demonstrating the power of your underlying .NET classes you have, and you can use to do certain things that you define in either you can create your own custom class in PowerShell itself, or you can utilize the PowerShell classes that sorry .NET classes which has been uh, created for you to be utilized by full-fledged programmers like in .NET. But being a PowerShell guy, you can still use those things. And apart from it, you can also, okay, I have an example of this thing. So you can also use your libraries that has been like someone has given you a library that they have created in .NET, a DLL you have got, and they have certain functions that you might want to use in your PowerShell. That is also possible. So I have a DLL that I have created in .NET, that is my class library.dll. So what I will do, I will simply go ahead and add the type, just like I did for this thing. Just like for this thing, I add the type like this, you see. Okay, so just like this, type definition I have added. This time I will again add it using the DLL I have. So I'll say add type, and I will say this DLL file. So I will say again, and my DLL, fine. Oops. Seems like some issue with this thing. Okay, I have this thing somewhere created. Yeah, some issue with that DLL. Let me check if that DLL is having issues. My class library is here, so let's do one thing, then debug, and I will pick it from here itself, just to make sure I'm not picking the wrong DLL, maybe. Yeah. Nope, this one is also throwing error. Sure, otherwise escape sequence type. Seems like I'm missing path. Some issue with this. Okay, I supposed to give the path, it does not take it automatically. Fine. Now if I will go ahead and I'll see in my class library I have dollar my lib instance, okay, is equals to new object, okay, and I will say in my class library there is a function I'll say my class library. Fine. I don't know what are the functions, so I have my class, right? So I've created a my class instance. Fine. And if I will say my live instance, my library instance dot, I have a function, my function. If I will call this my function, I get hey from my function. So in nutshell, this is how this is working. So I have created a library just like this. The here I had created all a class in the PowerShell itself. Here I have created it in .NET. I generated a DLL. I have got this DLL from maybe some .NET team or something, and then they told me that there is a class or which is my class, and there is a function which you can use in PowerShell. So I'm using the .NET created class and function, I mean associated function in PowerShell. So this is possible. I mean, this is what actually PowerShell does behind the scene. PowerShell is also written in some .NET framework DLL itself. So but you don't really see it. But the thing is, you can also create your own DLL. That's the whole point here. You can create your own DLL. You can get a DLL which has been created by someone, and you can still use it in PowerShell if you need it. So that's what it is. Now, so being said that, this is what I was trying to explain you in this session, that you can call your .NET framework classes in the PowerShell to make your tools go beyond just like a scripting language. First thing. Second is, if you need and you think that PowerShell scripting is not actually is not the classes you have in .NET framework are not meeting up to your expectation, then you can create your own classes and functions in PowerShell or in the .NET traditional library project as well, and you can import those things and add type and using all those things, and then you can start using it as well. So that's the whole idea. I will recommend you to join our Telegram group of Azure DevOps Pro group, which is where we discuss a lot of things related to DevOps, Azure, as well as other things around DevOps. Azure DevOps is the new service launched by Microsoft. But this group we are running before that, so our idea is to cover all the topics, all the things related to DevOps, whether it is tool, whether it is philosophy, whether it is practices, whether it is like anything around DevOps, we try to cover it. We also have Azure Talk group. I would recommend you to join there. We have more than 3,000 members, 3,300 actually, 3,300 members, more than that. And there we discuss all the issues that we get with Azure, all the new services that gets launched, and all the issue. I mean, you can post your issues if you are facing in production. There are experts including MVP, MCT, and other solution architect and all. They can help you fixing your issue. I have also started writing blog where I cover multiple things related to Azure, DevOps, and also data science, because that is what I'm working on now. So those things you can refer, and you can go ahead and watch. So thank you so much for your time, and let's hope we will meet again, and I will try to cover the next topics that we have pending for PowerShell basics training. Thank you so much. Bye bye.